So delighted to be with this community and inviting you just to sing with me for a moment this line from our Parshat Shavua that'll be in the chat in just a moment. Ve'asu li mikdash ve'shachanti בתוכם ועשו לי מקדש ושכנתי בתוכם. I love that tune that is set to this verse from Exodus 25, verse 8, the tune by Randy Scruggs and John Thompson. And the verse itself, Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, build for me a mikdash, a holy space, and I will dwell among you, in the plural. I want to say just from the outset that my experience of sitting practice, of our practice together, is really encapsulated in this verse. Build a place or a space for me, and I will accompany you there. If you take a moment and place your awareness, just noticing what the moment is, it creates a space for the divine to be there. Or probably more specifically, it allows us to notice that the divine is there. It's just allowing the noticing of what might already be true. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. If you will make for me this space that is holy, then I will dwell there with you. And I'd like to, in some ways, build on lovely teachings earlier this week by Naomi Schifrin and Rabbi Mark about what this place or space might be, this mikdash. And it is intuitive for me personally to want this holy place with the divine. Maybe that's not as intuitive for others, to really desire a place of God's dwelling and to feel that. But I will admit that it takes an effort to know and inhabit this place, not as an external mikdash, a place somewhere else where I can experience this feeling of God's presence, but as the body. And of course, there's no the body, as this body, as my body itself, as a mikdash, as a place for feeling the indwelling of divine presence. For some of us, that's not easy. And so we're going to practice with that today and then add another piece for Shabbat. And my guiding teacher for our practice today is the great Slonimer Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Noach Berezovsky, who lived 1911 to 2000. And he teaches, Ukmo sheleklal Yisrael ne'emar hatzivui, and in the same way that it was said to all of the people Israel, the command, Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, make a holy place and I will dwell within you. So too is this said, Lechol yachid me Yisrael. It's also said, not just to the whole people, but to each of us in our own individuality. That is, every generation, a Jew has the mitzvah to make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary. And then he says this, Sheya'aseh et gufo makom lahashra'at Shechina, that each Jew will make their body, their physical body, a place for the dwelling of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. And how do we do that? He goes on to be specific. The Mishkan, this place of dwelling, corresponds to our body. And he goes on into a beautiful, lengthy description of how our own bodies are actually maps of the Mishkan, and how the Mishkan, this portable sanctuary in the desert, was also a map of our own bodies. For example, the menorah, the lamps, were our eyes, and the incense altars, the place of Ketoret, was our nostrils, and even the little bells that the priests wore on their garments are our ears. Our bodies themselves are not a mishkan, they are the mishkan. They are the place for the indwelling of the Shekhinah, of the holy divine presence. And just as that is true for our bodies, it's also true that Shabbat Kodesh, the holy Shabbat itself, is also a site for the indwelling of God's presence. The body in space, Shabbat in time. And he teaches the holy Shabbat, he hizdamnut. She is an opportunity for us to return to our place of holiness, even if we are in the height of degradation. The power of Shabbat is that of the energy of Mekadesh. That's what we say in our Amidah on Shabbat, Mekadesh HaShabbat, right? Of making holy. Shabbat makes holy, and he teaches Shabbat brings us nearer to the Holy One, blessed be, so that there will be V'shachanti betocham, so that God will dwell betoch kol echad ve'echad, each inside each individual and individual. Another way of saying all of this is that the body itself in space and Shabbat in time are less a site for judgment, commercial, economic, social value, but as a resting place for the divine to inhabit. It is Heschel's palace in time, our own bodies in Shabbat. And so I want to practice with this now. I'll invite you into a posture of practice, however you're located right now, however your body is, however your body is feeling, whether you're sitting on a chair or a cushion or laying down or on some mode of public transportation, wherever you might be, however you might be. If you're listening to this later on YouTube, just going to invite you to notice what is true about your mikdash, your site for the resting of the divine. Is it feeling ease or tightness, or both in different places? Is there pain present, emotional, spiritual, physical? However your body is at this moment, can we meet it as a friend? Can we meet it as a container for the possibility of the resting of the Shekhinah? Naira Wahid said in a poem, "And I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I have been waiting my whole life for this." Maybe we'll just have an exhale and see where our body is. If it is waiting for some friendliness, I'd like to invite you to consider rest, however that might appear in your body in this pre-Shabbat moment, in whatever ways are available. I'd like to invite you to invite the divine presence into this body in this time, in whatever ways are available. Perhaps we can allow the gathering energies leading up to Shabbat to be present in this body in whatever ways are available. Noticing what is true, noticing all that is present, and allowing it to be there just as it is, without needing to fix or improve or change, honoring the truth of this body in this moment. Perhaps you notice the truth of this moment best by focusing your attention on the body itself or specific places in the body. Perhaps you notice the truth of this moment best by following specifically the dynamic of the breath, the inhale and the exhale. Noticing the truth of this moment through the sensations of body and breath. I'd like to invite you to notice the possibility of this body, your body, as a mikdash, a place where holiness, divine presence can reside. Notice any delight or softening that might arise in that invitation, or notice any resistance that might arise. All welcome, anything that is present and true. Notice the possibility that the divine is present in this body, in your body, in this moment, dynamic and ever-changing. Notice any softening or any tensing. We'll continue to notice the sensations of the breath and of the body as we continue to practice in our holy mikdash. Ve'asuli mikdash ve'shachanti betocham ve'asuli mikdash ve'shachanti betocham. What would it be like to know that our bodies and Shabbat are places where the holy dwells always, and we can, in their moments, dip in to the awareness that the Holy One is residing right here, right now. I'd like to close with a poem from May Sarton from her book, Coming into 80. I can look at my body as an old friend who needs my help, or an enemy who frustrates me in every way with its frailty and inability to cope. Old friend, I shall try to be of comfort to you to the end. And one piece of wisdom from Abigail Bengson. I feel the most beautiful when I remember that my body is not a thing to look at, but a moment to enjoy. My thanks and gratitude to Harry and Mark, to Monique Mayer and Cantor Jan Mahler. May our Shabbat be a mikdash of knowing and dwelling in God's presence, respecting our own bodies and everyone else's bodies as holy. Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Dorothy Richman, guiding us so beautifully into this Shabbat. And let's seal that practice as we do each day. If you're in mourning, or if you're observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the Mourner's Kaddish, you're welcome to do so. You can put the name of those you're honoring in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, it's always just a gentle reminder that you have a role to play here too. You are creating a minyan of comfort and support for those who have suffered loss. And that's a great mitzvah and a wonderful act of compassion and kindness. So please stay present for a few moments to support those who are saying Kaddish, who are invited to join me by rising in body or in spirit. And you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yadash,
Shmei Rabba, Yomad Yirach Te Yamlich Malchute, Chayechon Yomechon, Yechol Israel, Hagala, Karim Yivro Amishabbat, Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Ameach Maya,
Rabba,
Achri Yishtabach, Aminase, Tadar Talal Shmei Kudusha, Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Trishukata V'Nachamata, Damirande Alma V'Yishlama Rabba Minshemaya V'Chayim Amin Melchol Yisrael V'Yamim Amin V'Shalom B'Mamad V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Kol Yoshvei Tevel
Say shalom b'mamav. Say shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. V'yakol yoshvei tevel. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom
B'mamav Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu v'Yakol Israel
V'yakol
B'imru
Yoshvei Tevel.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. May all you who are in mourning or observing Lord such, may you be comforted among all those who are mourning. And we're glad you're here. Um, Thanks again to Harry Goboa for holding our Mikdash beautifully, and to our sponsors today, Rabbi Monique Mayer for sponsoring in memory of Chazan Stephen Kotzen, and Cantor Jan Mahler for sponsoring in memory of Seal Schloss Mahler. Zichronam Libracha, may their memories be a blessing always. For those of you who are leaving us now, we hope you'll join us next week. I'm just going to make a note that on Monday is one of our quarterly sits that is co-sponsored with Dorothy in New York and focusing on issues relating to aging. By the way, that poem by Nate Sarton was pretty perfect for that on that account. The theme next Monday, I'll be leading the sit, which is, as I mentioned, is co-sponsored with Dorothy, and the theme is going to be kavod, honoring our bodies, our aging bodies. So that poem serves as a wonderful lead into that. We hope you'll join us then. And of course, as always, you're welcome just to continue to sit with that beautiful guidance that Rabbi Dorothy offered. You can turn off the sound on your device and continue to sit with us with the support of this community, or join us for conversation about today's teaching, beautiful teaching. And it's been wonderful to kind of marinate in the themes this week of the Mishkan. And thank you, Dorothy, so much for guiding us and tying a lot of the thread, bringing a lot of the threads of the week together so beautifully and skillfully. Where to begin? I was interested, since it's Friday, I guess, and you mentioned Heschel, I was thinking about the relationship between what the Mishkan represents. I don't want to get too intellectual about this or too heady about it. But I'm thinking about where we are in the week here on the cusp of Shabbat, and the Mishkan in a way kind of represents what Heschel called the world of space, right? Like, how do we infuse the world of Gashmiut, of materiality, physicality, with holiness, or how do we notice the holiness that's in our temporal world? And then we go into Shabbat, which is, as Heschel says, we leave the world of time and space, and we're in timelessness and formlessness, just pure spirit, right? So I want to invite you to talk a little bit about that, if you would. I don't, because this um, uh, today is such a very powerful teaching about, as you said, noticing something that's already present, noticing the sacred indwelling in our bodies in this moment when when we notice and bring our attention to that. Would you say that when we do that, we kind of move into a little bit of a Shabbat dimension, that we're kind of at this moment of integrating Shabbat and the 6 days in some way? I guess what I'm asking you really is about how do the interplay between Shabbat and the Mishkan.
It's a fascinating question. I think it's also a question about like materiality and spirituality. And I think the way that I'm going to take it, which may or may not be exactly what you were asking, so let me know. But the thing
Take
that
it wherever you want to take will be good.
I'll tell you what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the idea, because you said at one point, are we bringing Shabbat in? And
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading this Parshan, this Torah commentator, the Netivot Shalom, all year, and he's like in love with Shabbat. He pretty much almost anything he says, he's talking about that thing, and then he says, and it's also true of Shabbat. Like
Mm-hmm.
Shabbat is just always this experience that's at another level
Mm-hmm.
of of um of experience. And I think what I'm curious about is I think it's true in the body. You know, Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. If we just bring awareness through practice to the moment,
Mm-hmm.
holiness is always there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is true.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's Shabbat. And I'm not sure, I don't know, but I wonder whether there is such a thing as Shabbat outside of wherever you are Friday night to Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been all these different experiments or even folk tales, right? About like the tom of Shabbat, the flavor of
Mm-hmm.
Shabbat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
can you do Shabbat on a Tuesday? You know? And as you know, in some of my work with Institute for Jewish Spirituality, we bring amazing Jewish ritual leaders, rabbis and cantors and Kohanot together who often are working on Shabbat. And we have an experience that in many ways explicitly feels like Shabbat, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not Shabbat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just wonder, you know, is part of what the Nativot Shalom is teaching that Shabbat is another dimension, it's another home,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can,
Can you repeat what the Tivo Shalom teaching again?
right? He teaches, I mean, specifically here,
Mm-hmm.
what he said is that Shabbat is always, no matter where you are in like the most depraved places,
Mm-hmm.
places of depravity, you can
Mm-hmm.
always return home on Shabbat, right? Vishochanti b'tocham.
Mm-hmm.
You can always return to that sense of you're with the indwelling of the holy on
Mm-hmm.
Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
I think he also, just in a general sense, feels like Shabbat is always the reset. You know, you can always, pass go and start over with $200, like it's just always going to come around again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's different
Mm-hmm.
than the Mikdash. I think the Mikdash, um, you know, and especially the body as Mikdash, is a feeling that can be 24/7.
Right.
And I think Shabbat's this thing that we can tap into and that we might be reminded of or get tastes of during the week,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not the same. But I'm not sure.
Well,
I'm curious.
maybe there's another way. I guess what you're saying is extremely helpful to me, what you're saying. I guess another framework for this is the different levels or dimensions of the soul, right? And in the four worlds of Jewish mysticism, which moves from, includes the body and emotions and mind and then spirit. And that the Mikdash and what we were practicing with in terms of bringing it awareness to the body as the container for the indwelling of the spirit is that there is soul in the body. There is a spiritual dimension of the body. It's not like there's spirit and then there's body. And I think that's a kind of a revelation for a lot of people that Judaism has that idea, right? That it's not like, well, we're in these bodies and that's mundane, but then there's the sacred and that's the non-body. But actually, it's an amazing teaching that the body itself is a dimension of soul. So that's, the Mikdash. But then Shabbat, we move kind of like we remember that we are not defined by our bodies. We're not defined by our emotions. We're not defined by our mind state, that there's a reality to us which is that spiritual, the purely spiritual, the pure soul, and that Shabbat. And we kind of plug into that mode. And then we go back to I'm living in my body, I'm going about my business during the week, with all the frustrations and big and little challenges of being a human being in a body. And yet I retain, when I pause, I can remember, oh yeah, the divine is here with me right now too in this day-to-day stuff. Does that make sense? I mean, is that an analogous to what you're saying, you think?
I think 100%. And I think, I was just noticing in the chat, like, I don't think, in the same way that people think practice is about calm, you know, and like perfection, it's the opposite. It's like if the body is a site of discomfort
Mm,
or
mm,
pain,
mhm,
that is also theological, right? And that means that, like, with our practice, we can know that the dwelling of the presence is actually with the pain and the discomfort,
mhm,
and that it's not a separate thing. And it's not that, like, oh, if I could ignore my hip,
mhm,
then I'd really feel God. It's that there's an idea, imo anochi b'tzara, that
mhm,
God says to Israel, I am with you in your
mm,
suffering.
right.
And I just wonder, in the same way
Mm,
that a good friend or a pastoral presence can just sit with you while you're feeling whatever you're feeling, I think that's true of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is in my, hip going, ouch, it does hurt, doesn't it?
yeah.
You know, my teacher, Norman Fisher, once said to me, I hope I'm getting this right, said, even in really difficult pain, part of what we do in our practice is find a place, a space that's not pain. And in that space, God is also there,
Mm,
right? And it's not like the pain isn't, it's just that while everything feels pain, 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 99% of the experience is pain, there might be 1% available that's not pain, right? And maybe the proportions are better, 50-40, but like it just means there's a space to feel the Shekhinah with us in
mhm.
that pain. That
So you're
that sh
offering two alternatives there. One is that the Shekhinah is in that 40% or the 1%,
yeah,
but also that the Shekhinah is in the sharing in the burden of the
yeah,
pain, right?
yeah. And I think it's not what most of us were taught. Most of us were taught, like, to deserve,
Mm-hmm.
you have to deserve God's presence. You have to be good. You have to, I don't know where
Mm-hmm.
that came from, but it's pretty, but that's not what the teachings say at all,
Mm-hmm.
right? God's in all of it, and God created the world through brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
This world is a world of brokenness. So if God is in it, God is in the brokenness with us.
Right. I mean, I think to that point, I think because most of us did not learn, as kids from the Jewish mystical tradition, which has that idea of like the world is fractured and the divine is in that fracture. Um, that May Sarton poem and what you just were saying about the difference between that informs the idea of meeting our experience as a friend versus as an enemy, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking of, our teacher, Sylvia Boorstein's phrase, may I meet this moment fully, may I meet it as a friend, which immediately came to me when you brought that May Sarton poem, that that when we do that, it's kind of a simple formula that's hard to implement, as you said also in the teaching. Um, can I adopt an attitude of friendliness towards experience? Because if I'm able to do that and bring awareness to it, I will find the Shekhinah or divine presence is there and was there all along. I just didn't see it. I will wake up to that presence if I can stop fighting reality and treat it as a friend. So it's beautiful teaching, Dorothy. Thank you so much. Do you want to say a word about your Passover
Oh,
workshop
sure.
before we close?
Sure. Everyone's welcome. It will be both on Zoom and in person in San Francisco, 2 Tuesday nights Pacific time, but also a Sunday day-long retreat, and everything will be recorded. I think we have like we try to make this accessible to everyone, so cost shouldn't be an issue for you. I think the whole Zoom price is $36 for the whole package deal. It's really just an offering for anyone who really wants to spend a little time, not just focusing on the physical preparations for Pesach, which can be vast, but also the internal getting ready, clearing out, and really preparing for hopefully liberation.
Beautiful. As always, Dorothy, big treat to have an opportunity to practice with you, learn from you, with you, and thank you so much. By the way, Rabbi Dorothy is receiving her Doctorate of Divinity at Jewish Theological Seminary on Monday, so mazal tov to you on that. 25 years, more than 25 years. That's great. Enjoy it. Enjoy your reunion with your classmates. Thanks, Harry, for holding us together today, as always, and each of you for being here. Wishing everyone a sweet and restorative Shabbat. We need it. And we will see you back here on Monday, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all.